whatever you do at this point, make sure you say the right thing because it is being recorded. So welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Rick Reguera, and I'll be your host today at our Agile International Career Fair Conference, right? I'm excited to have you guys here. Again, this is the Agile community. We've been growing this community for a long time now and doing great things by training and teaching people on the weekends for free, right? And now we've finally decided to expand this, right? What else can we do for our community? This is a very humbling, opportunity for us to help others find jobs, right? So this is a good yearly event that we're going to be running on an ongoing basis. So again, welcome. Thank you for being here. We've got our international community. We've got amazing volunteers, and we've got some speakers that are also contributing of their time. We're excited to have you guys here. This is the agenda. Yes, Julie, you're about to say something?
I'd like to thank all of the volunteers for putting this together. This was an effort full of love, and a wonderful Allie. Allie did so much hard work. I want to thank Allie and Viral and Tina and Andre Noju, Jackie Bedford, Joanne Aristide, Rolanda Segovia, Evan Ackerman, Alka Banderi, and Javier Portocavari. I might know. So it was a labor of love, and we hope that everyone benefits from this. And we're going to be seeing you all also at the Agile International Conference because we're doing the same thing.
So great job. I'll applaud. I know everybody's on mute, but I'll applaud for you, Julie. So again, these are the people behind the scenes making it happen. We're really appreciative of you giving up of your time to help. Like we mentioned earlier, this is our agenda. It is pretty packed. Everything's going to be recorded. So if you miss something, please don't get upset, right? You got some sessions that we actually have 2 breakout rooms. Okay, so that will be recorded, and we'll make sure we'll share that with you immediately after. Okay. Moving forward, we have our career speakers. Of course, Marcelo. We got Mark. We got Mike Ortiz, Mike Kublin. We got Liam Domardi, Emily Vicini, Lauren Hoffman, and Alex Funkhauser. So again, we appreciate you guys giving up your time to help our community. Of course, we've got our recruiting companies here as well. Gravity IT, Dexian, Sherlock Talent, and how do I pronounce this? Is it
Cadre?
Cadre. All right. Thank you again for being here, supporting our organization and the community. We did mention that we do have our conference coming up March 6th and 7th. Regina, do we have a location yet? Do we have a place? You're muted. We can't hear you.
We do. It's going to be at one of the universities, one of the local universities. We're very excited. It is going to be a 2-day conference. AI track, agile transformations, business agility, technology experts are coming in, many great companies. But guess what? We're adding the job fair in person. Okay, we're bringing back the job fair. We're going to have a job fair track, professional development, and we're adding a tidbit of personal development and health and wellness as well. All right, so it's going to be jam-packed. It's going to be a lot of fun, great raffles, great charity events, hopefully a lot of great networking and a lot of great tidbits. We are also going to add workshops. So those of you that want to join, either want to provide a workshop or want to take a workshop, that's going to be on day 2. So we're very excited. March 6th and 7th, save the date. And Rick, I heard we have a special for all the folks that are joining today.
Okay, let us know, Regina, because I'm curious about that special. You have that already?
We do. We have a special discount. We're going to go ahead and put it on the chat for you guys as well.
All right. Regina, let me ask you a question. I think you started by dancing in the conference, right? Do you have any surprises for us in how this is going to be kicked off? What's that second day surprise that you wanted to share?
Oh my goodness. So for sure, we're going to have an after party. Okay. It's going to be at the same location, so people don't have to drive anywhere. And we might have a special theme. We're thinking about doing a beach party on day 2, like a theme, like we get to come in and dress up and Just be casual, have a great time. So please, please, please don't forget and join us.
Regina, there's some people I don't want to see in shorts. Okay. Why?
We're in
Okay.
Miami. Listen, we're in Miami, right? We're in Miami. And
All
then
You
I
right.
can use their university pool.
no, well,
Okay.
no, I don't think so. No, 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 that won't be included, but that's okay. That's okay.
All
And then
right.
I think Kay, you guys can put the AIC page where we have the registration and the discount right now. The discount is happening this month. It's only till the end of October. Please share with your company, share with your colleagues, share with your friends. And whatever we're doing here today with the recruiting companies, with the special speakers talking about how can we get jobs, helping people in our community. There's a lot happening, and they're going to talk about it today in the keynote. In the industry is going through suffering right now. We're going to be doing that in person, so stay tuned.
So 90% of our events are for free. This one here, there is a charge, but guess what? We moved that right back into the community. So last year we did a great job in helping the local, charity event. Regina, do you want to share anything about that?
Yeah, so we get a lot of, because it's at the university, we get a lot of student volunteers, and we actually give them back free Agile certifications. And on top of that, we pick a local a local charity. We had God We Speak last year for disabled children. So a lot of like the raffle tickets and a lot of what the people contributed went to that. So go to the website. You guys can see some of the amazing pictures. We had over 300 people this past year. We're shooting for 500 in 2025. So we look forward to it.
Right. Good job, Regina. Thank you. So like I mentioned earlier, we do have these amazing free events on Wednesdays. We have speakers come in, and then we also have our Saturday sessions. Okay, so we're really doing a lot for the community. Please come and join us. I do represent Transformation Experts. Outside of that, we help organizations through their agile transformation. But really, this is all about careers today. We want to make sure we're helping you. We do have some products that we also provide for free. And this is something that the community is building out, right? We're building a little clickable framework, right? Where you can actually learn more about Scrum and some other tools that we use. All right. So again, we keep doing this to kind of help the community, and we'll continue for all. I think it's been like what, 10 years now, Marcelo, we've been in this journey. So it's a long time that we've been giving back and helping out. So we want to thank you for participating. It's going to be an amazing event. So excited to have you guys here. Please interact, right? Please communicate with each other. We're probably going to take a little picture at the end. So we want to make sure you continue the relationships you build today, right? So with the LinkedIn post, you're going to be able to actually communicate with a lot of the people that are here at the event. Okay. Some of you might have jobs for people. Some of you might need jobs, right? How do we make sure we kind of connect the dots there? So again, thank you very much for joining us, and we're ready to kick it off. And I kind of gave you guys a little bit more time. How do we want to proceed from here? Are we ready for a 5-minute break before we start the main stage here, Marcelo? All right. No, Regina doesn't want a 5-minute break. Regina, you have anything else you want to share for those few
No,
minutes?
no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, so Marcelo, you want to go ahead and start? Is there anything you want to put up on the screen, or do we want to give it a few more minutes before we start?
No, I'm good to get going. I'm don't have anything specifically to put up on the screen per se. I was just working on some notes from that survey that I had put up on yesterday. Um, for our little mock interview review, if you will. Pesky questions you get asked in job interviews. We got some responses, but I encourage anybody who's ever had that job interview where you've been asked that question, you all know what question that was. That one question that was a little pesky for you and left you wondering, even though you were in the middle of the interview, and say, okay, if I had a second chance to answer this question, I might do it a little differently. And it left you thinking. So while Rick and I are going, through some things, if you have that memory of that pesky question, I want to encourage you to drop it in the chat, okay? Because well, we did get some feedback on the forum. I want to open it up to everybody here, okay? Because not everybody might have seen that posting up on LinkedIn and stuff like that. So if you've had that experience of that interview with that question, the one that made you go, I want to hear about it. Okay. I want to hear about it from you guys, and then we'll try to tackle it together. Fair enough?
So thank you, Marcelo. Again, so this is part of our main, presentation here is really, this is live, guys. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to have conversations and we're going to learn from it. All right. So let's be vulnerable. Let's share some of those interviewing questions that kind of stomped you. And then we're going to give you our insights. This is what we look for when we're interviewing people, right? These are some of the questions we ask when we're interviewing people. And I like to start with some of the foundational questions, right? Marcelo, what's the most basic question everyone asks when they're being interviewed?
Yeah. Well, actually, somebody boldly put that in the chat, Rick, as if they knew we were thinking about this already, and I could look at any one of you and say, tell me about yourself,
I
you
love
know?
that. So that
Tell
is
me about yourself.
that's an initial, very basic question to kind of break the ice. Talk about yourself, right? And then you start going, right? Uh,
Yeah, it exactly. And it's interesting in the sense that it's both your opportunity to put your best foot forward, okay? But also in a sense, because the person may not know you, Rick, it's also a challenging question, even though it's so simple, because obviously people are very different. If, for example, you're an introverted person, okay, or you happen to be someone who, interpersonally may have different challenges, in interpersonal relationships, you're not there to say you're an introverted person, but I'll just use the phrase neurodivergent, in which case you perceive and interact with people in a different way. Speaking about yourself may be challenging just from the perspective of that, you're being asked to share something about yourself, and it's difficult for you to process how much is enough and how much is too much.
I
Okay.
love that. I love that. And one of the challenges I have, Marcelo, is I talk too much. I love what I do and I get very passionate. So I just start going blah, 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 right? And there's a point in time where there might be too much information, right? Where you're not even allowing. I've actually had people that I've interviewed where I've asked them one question and they didn't actually stop. The
Right.
whole 30-minute interview, they just kept going and going and going and going, and then actually pause a second for me to actually ask
Mhm.
them additional questions. So you
Yeah.
got to be careful, guys. You got to be calm. You got to make sure you're reading, you're the person that's interviewing you,
Yeah.
so that you know that this is, a stop. And sometimes I even mention that in the beginning. Hey, this is a passionate topic of mine. Please let me know when you feel that you've received enough to
Mhm.
kind of go to the next question. That way they know that you're holding back, which is really nice, right? Knowing that you're passionate, right?
Right. Absolutely. And for example, when I'm working with my students, let's say I'll pick one, Scrum Masters and stuff, and I'm coaching them for interviewing for a position. I use a similar tool. Well, actually, I use the exact tool that I use when I'm helping build a team. There's a tool called the User Manual to Me. Okay. And it's easy enough to Google. Okay. It's a simple template. It's basically if you were providing someone else an instruction manual for, and forgive me, but I'm going to pick one of you at random. Let's say Javier is going to go work with someone, and Javier wants to present this other person with an instruction manual for how to interact with Javier. Okay. Javier has taken some time to put together this instruction manual that describes who Javier is. In other words, it starts to answer the question, tell me about yourself. But it tells that person about Javier in a structured way, and it gives Javier the control to be able to expose enough that he feels comfortable with, and the things that he does not have to expose. Okay. And having that on hand when someone asks you that sort of question, if you've gone through that exercise, you're carrying around a little bit of telling that person about yourself in a structured way that that person interviewing you says, wow, Javier's got his act together. They're caring about their sense of self right at his fingertips. He doesn't have to think about it at that very moment. Javier's come prepared for this interview. Let me ask him some other questions. And you've now captured that person's interest in you. Does that make sense?
Yes, I love it. Marcelo,
Yeah.
something that I also think that we should consider, and everyone should be doing this, is you need to investigate who's interviewing you, the company, right? Because there could be some key things that you mentioned when that first initial conversation that says, I value this, which is kind of the same of what you value in your organization. You looked at their organizational values. You looked at how they're currently structured, right? I even look at the posture of who's interviewing me, the tone, right? Because sometimes trying to mimic their tone makes them more comfortable. So it's just an interesting thing to make sure you're doing your homework to kind of get that. I've had people that I said, hey, do you know anything about transformation experts? No. Why are you even here? Like you're already lost. If you didn't do your homework, you're just not worth it. You're not showing that you're the kind of person that really cares about investing your time and learning, what that organization does.
Right.
Going back to your earlier point about talking and talking, I think a good tip, especially for virtual interviews, is put a timer somewhere where you can see it, right? And limit your answers to 2 minutes or less.
That's great. That's a great tool, Howard. That's a great tool, Howard. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. I'm going to double click on what you said though, Rick. And I know we tend to make the kind of jokes, and this is being recorded, so I'm being respectful. But we tend to make jokes about lawyers, attorneys, right? You know what I'm saying. But can we borrow one of their tricks? One of the things attorneys, especially trial attorneys, practice and get good at is how they're going to approach something when they're going into the courtroom. In other words, the anecdote is a lawyer never asks a question they don't already know the answer to. Okay. And so, in that sense, one of the things that we can do best for ourselves is do like what we're doing now, talking about some of these pesky questions, okay, and practice them. But more so, to your point, before you go in, when you're dealing with a recruiter, and I know that there's some here, okay, and maybe I'm giving away some of their, their secrets, but ask who is going to be interviewing me? What is their position in the organization? Okay. It is not illegal for you to ask a recruiter that you're working with to share with you any potential information that may put you in a position to better understand. I'm not saying I'm creating a competition here, but having information to understand who you're going to be talking to puts you in a better position to, like you said, get comfortable with them right from the onset.
I love that. And I give you an example. Someone's going through an interview right now, but they have 3 people that they actually got to get interviewed with. And one is the technical person. They really want to understand your technical competency. One is more like, I want to understand how well you project manage. And then one is the C-level. And they're all looking at from different lights. right? From different views. So they might want additional information related to how does that affect me? How does that connect the dots for me? So I love the idea of investigating a little bit more. Go to LinkedIn, see what they've liked, see what some of the information that they've shared. I think those are all winners for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's it's a thing that all too often will make a difference in a candidate is how they come off as prepared. Okay. You could fly by the seat of your pants, and maybe you're that person that can get away with that. Okay. But the better prepared you are walking in, again, to borrow from the attorney's tactic book, okay, the likelier your chances are to be met with, even if some of the questions that they ask you stump you, but at least they recognize that you respected them enough to come prepared from some perspectives. For example, I'll dig to the question that we got asked in the survey, Rick, which was about one of the more challenging situations, and it's a C word, okay? It's conflict. So the question that came into us yesterday was, okay, well, tell me about a time you had a conflict with a leader. This was from someone who was being interviewed as a position as a product owner. Now, if you understand what that position is, I'll be brief about it. There's someone who's given some bunch of money to meet some customer's needs and has to be able to account for how they're spending that money. Not an unimportant role. Okay. And sometimes that person's decisions making may run into some difference of opinion with, as you mentioned, some C-level, some senior manager. All right. And so the question was, how have you handled it? Now, from my perspective, and I'm going to talk about it briefly, and then I want to hear what you think, Rick, is conflict usually arises from misunderstandings. Pure and simple. We don't understand each other's point of view, our perspectives, our rationale for decision making. How did you arrive at that decision? How did you arrive at that priority or that importance? So if we start from the position of that conflicts are usually rooted in some sort of misunderstanding, okay, then we can start to resolve conflicts. So when I've been asked that question, I'll answer very simply. I go, well, first I'm going to seek to understand where we've misunderstood each other. Okay. And I'll turn it around a little bit and I'll say, does that make sense? We've probably misunderstood, we probably missed each other somehow. And so I'm going to try to figure out where we missed each other. Okay. Then let that person marinate and then we can keep going. I don't know. What do you think, Rick?
So I love the idea that you could get to a compromise, right? You could get but there are situations, guys, where people think this way and this person thinks this way, right? It's an interesting scenario to say, okay, just because we see things with different views, right? How do we kind of move forward from that? I actually think it's a healthy thing. I think sometimes people see one direction and that's it, right? Having different views of what's going on makes it more valuable to understand it from different perspectives. I think it provides a lot. So how do we appreciate somebody that doesn't think the way we think, right? How has their journey taken them to that mindset, right? And I hate I've seen so many situations where we think we're the best. We think that what we know and what we've learned is so much, I'm so much better than you in a sense, right? Look at all the tools I have and you are just you're not meeting them where they're at. And you're not working with them and you're not becoming attached to their view of the world, right? So I think there is going to be points where there's going to be, okay, we're going to go this direction. Are we going to fight that direction or are we going to just support each other and continue even though it's not 100%, you're 100% on board, right? I think that's going to be a give and take that we have to learn in our journey. We have to figure that out as we continue down, as long as we're open for that, right?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And one of the things we have to keep in mind when we're thinking about this particular topic of conflicts, which, especially if you're interviewed for a leadership sort of position, that's like a fundamental question that you get asked, right? Because product ownership is a leadership position implicitly, okay, is to recognize, as you said, not all conflict has to be conflicting. Okay. There's constructive conflict. I mean, destructive conflict for sure, but there's constructive conflict. And if we understand that if conflict can be made constructive, okay, then we can work towards figuring out, what direction can we take to go forward together. In other words, come to some shared understandings, some things that we can all agree on, some common ground, and then explore where our differences of opinion are and misunderstandings might be.
I love it. I love it. So that's great. Let me throw another scenario here that I think is important when I'm interviewing people, and maybe everyone here also takes this same approach. I like to provide them with I want to provide a scenario for them, and I want them to actually execute that and show me that they know the actual position that they're applying for. Example. Hey, Marcelo, thank you for applying. I would love for you to walk me through sprint planning. And this scenario base opens up a lot of conversation, right? I've had too many people, I guess, read about Agile or read about that, but they can't actually simulate it. They can't walk through an example to kind of showcase their mindset of how they're facilitated, plus the actual interaction that takes place. I think people, for some reason, aren't good at doing this. So I don't know. What are your thoughts there, Marcelo? Do you ask those kind of questions when you're interviewing?
I confess, I've had, in the work that you and I've done, Rick, I think we've probably interviewed, gosh, maybe if it's, 2 dozen, 3 dozen different folks for different Scrum Master positions or coaching positions, it's probably, more than that, or maybe even double. Questions about how they actually carry out an event, for example, like what you've described. It's more so about the person's thought process than the actual mechanics, than the actual mechanics.
Yeah.
So my thoughts would be is like if you are being interviewed or want to be interviewed for a Scrum Master position, okay, set up for yourself these mock scenarios, these mock scenes. Okay. I mean, especially if you've already worked as a Scrum Master, use your own experience as an example. Pick a sprint planning that didn't go so well. Okay. Describe what happened before, what happened during, and then what you learned from it. Okay. It describes your experience to the interviewer, number one, good, bad, whatever. Okay. But the fact that you've actually gone through it and then iterated on it, that you've reflected on it, you've learned from it, okay, demonstrates to them that, oh, yeah, this person's got skills. They're going to contribute to their own professional development, okay, because they've already got that mindset of self-improvement. Okay. So if I were going to answer that question, I'd look at it from, what am I trying to accomplish? How did I prepare for it? What did I learn from it after I did it? And there's a handout there, Art.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to distinguish between interviews, right? Very often there's the first interview and the second interview, right? In the first interview, you just want to get to know them and see if you can work together. And then the next time, if it's a coach, we've actually sent them a scenario and asked them to create a PowerPoint on how they would approach that scenario. And then what I found the challenge is that when we ask questions to them, I'm looking to see if they're actually listening to the question and responding to the question. Very often they're not listening. They're just going on off of a script. So that's one thing I watch for is are they listening and are they responding so that they know what we're asking about? Sometimes without a PowerPoint, we'll use a scenario, but I'll ask them for something. I might ask a Scrum teacher to, I'm a new person on the team. Teach me about what I have to do in a stand-up. Teach me how to create a story in Jira. Teach me about acceptance criteria. And I want to see how they react and how they can do it right then and there.
I love that, Art. Yeah, absolutely. We've got another hand, Diala, and you're on mute.
Yeah. Hi, good morning, everyone. So I just want to add something as well. In some cases, when someone is over prepared or they have a text in place, just like it was mentioned, sometimes they don't actually listen to the question. Sometimes it feels unauthentic in a way, or sometimes it's nice to see the actual person. And when sometimes they are over prepared, it seems they're off sometimes. And because I've done interviews like at some point, and usually, yeah, they have something already prepared. So if you ask them something similar, it feels like they go back to the text.
Yeah.
But sometimes you're interested to see the person because, for example, the Scrum Master role, it has so much collaboration, emotional intelligence, I would say. So you just need to see, behind, like what's the essence of the person as well, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, Diala. Thank you for that. And you give me a thought to one particular tactic that I've used from time to time, especially in relation to those sorts of pesky questions. So let's say you've posed me something, okay? You've posed me a question, and it's that kind of pesky question, okay? The tool comes actually from coaching, and that is called reflection. Okay? There's nothing to say that in an interview you cannot take what the interviewer has said and reflect it back in a way for two things. One, it tells the person that you actually heard them, and two, especially on any finer point of what they asked, puts the interviewer in a position to further clarify or define what they've said. What I'm actually talking about is called reflection. In other words, Diala, I heard you ask me blank. Did I understand that correctly as I said it? In other words, you're reflecting back what you understood from what they were asking. Okay? It's a tool that's used, actually, believe it or not, in therapy, in family therapy, to help people talk to each other better. Okay? And so depending on how clear the question was from the interviewer, you can use that tool to establish that connection with that person. And I'll say it this way, draw them in. Okay? Draw them in.
I love that, Marcelo. But I've also had situations where people ask like 3 or 4 questions all at once. And you're trying to decipher the first one, you're trying to decipher the second one, and you want to say it nicely, but it's hard to fully digest it, right?
You can turn around and still, I mean, it's also your interview, Rick, and say, can we take those one at a time?
Love that.
Can we take those one at a time?
Yeah. Yeah. Because it can get complicated. Some people say one complicated question after another complicated, and then a third one. And then you're like, can we get to the first one first and have an understanding? I love that approach.
Yeah, if you're in a position where if you're and this is kind of I'll know it's out there, it's just my approach, but if you happen to have a whiteboard handy or somewhere to write down, okay, there's no legal ramifications for you saying, "Hey, can we take a moment to write that down so that we're both on the same page on what this is about?" And that act of writing it down, A, shows you're paying attention. B, it means you're engaged in this interview. C, it shows you're not messing around and this is your interview too. Okay. And then if something gets a little hairy in the interview, you can always refer back. Well, wait a minute. We're talking about that, right? You can always refer back to your notes in the interview.
So again, I'm curious from the audience if there's anybody else that has like a specific question that's
Well,
in an interview. Has anybody put it in the chat, Marcelo?
we've had a great number of questions, and then there's that other pesky. The first one was tell me about yourself, right?
Yeah.
Then there's the tell me about your weaknesses.
Whoa, I love that one.
What are your weaknesses?
Tell me.
What are your weaknesses?
I've
Okay.
got none. I've got none. No.
Yeah. That's from my perspective. I internally, I know this is being recorded. I internally call that a trap of a question. Okay. Because it's so broad, it's so vague. Okay. That you have to ask yourself, the question beyond that. And there's no reason you couldn't, but again, you've got to basically understand if that person is that type of interviewer that, as I was discussing with Diala, that you could create that connection with, okay, that you can then further probe and go, well, when you talk about your weaknesses, you say to yourself, okay, what do I consider a weakness? Okay, the fact that I don't know everything, that's a weakness. So that you can turn around and say, well, since I don't know everything, I could say that not knowing everything is a weakness. Can you tell me a little bit more about, weakness in what context?
Marcelo, I try to ask a different type of question. That's a tough one. What I just asked more is like, when's the last time you failed? I know it has a little different twist to it, but I'm more looking for them to be vulnerable and kind of share that. I've actually had people say, and they start thinking for a long time. And I'm like, that's scary. If you don't know the last time you just failed, that's scary that it's taking you that long to think of something that you didn't do as well as you thought you did. I know that that's not fully into the weakness part of it, but that is one that I normally ask to see how they, kind of fester up that answer.
Yeah. The thing is this, that when the person that asks you that sort of question, and that's why I internally call it a trap, because you're missing complete context to it. You don't know this other person. Okay. So if they're asking you from a personal perspective what your weakness might be, you don't know this person enough that you should feel confident to talk about yourself in that sense. Okay. Number one. Number two, if they're talking about your form of work, for what position you're interviewing for, okay, then you have a little bit more context. But without the context, okay, that's why I call it a trap kind of a question. And I tend to say, can you tell me a little more about, in context of what? Okay.
Wow.
Because we just met, right? Especially if it's the first interview. We just met. Okay. And that demonstrates a sense of self-awareness, okay, on my part, all right, and tells the interviewer that you're respecting their question, but you've just met. You know what I mean? So it puts them in the position where if they can tell you a little bit more, then you can proceed. You say, well, when was the last time you failed your team? And I go, well, the last time I failed my team, I learned from it. That's an answer. If the person is not sure about why you're answering that way, you can say, well, do you want to know the context of that situation? You know, they might not feel me sharing comfortably that context of that situation, you know, because I tend to deal with very uncomfortable situations when I'm working with teams, you know. And that's where you as an interviewee have to put your interpersonal skills to good use. And that's why you should be practicing before you go into those sorts of situations, because these kinds of questions will come up all the time. Art, I don't hate to put you on the spot, but it looked like you had something on your mind.
Yeah, well, I want to follow up when because you mentioned a good point, right? When you're being interviewed, it's a good thing to ask them questions. They actually like that. Whether it's about, clarify what you mean when you ask me about my failure. And by the way, always assume that the question is about the work. They don't want to hear what happened in your marriage or anything else like this. They really don't care, right? So, but it's a good thing to ask them, what are you looking for in this position? What is it you want me to provide and to do for you so that you're comfortable knowing that you can actually do it or at least want to take a shot at it? And it helps create a dialogue because if it's just one-way street, you're not gonna interact, right? You're not gonna get that chance to show who you are. So have a dialogue, talk to them.
Absolutely.
I love that. And I've had some interviewing that really love to talk. So if you just open the floodgates to letting them talk about themselves and about what the company's about, you're pretty much getting closer to getting that job, right? So that's an interesting way. And then you can compliment them, right? Depending on what they say, you could say, okay, this is how I view that. This is how I view that. So then you have a lot more to work with. So really, really interesting view there. Thank you, Art. Marcelo, any other questions that we have on the chat? To make sure we're addressing.
Well, I also got asked here about, how you handle, when you get presented with conflicting priorities. Okay. Again, this is the same person that asked about interviewing for a product owner position. Okay. When you get asked a question about that when you're as a product owner, okay, part of that is into play into how you decide what's next. Okay. And when you've got conflicting priorities, again, it's one of those we don't have an understanding of any decision-making framework that we have. Okay. So, in other words, if you've got some product ownership experience, especially, okay, you've got some sound training, you got your credential, okay, go back and review those things and how you would apply them, okay, and then ask the question. So, in other words, whether you're using a weighted short job first, whatchamacallit, or some other prioritization framework, musts, should, could, would, that sort of stuff. Practice it out yourself as a product owner. Look at your own experience and say, when I had to choose between competing options, okay, what is my own decision making for it? And how do I internally resolve that conflict? In other words, have the two sides of your brain play it out. Play out the conflict for yourself and then say to yourself, how do I resolve it? And go back and find out that understanding framework that you work off of that will let you then say, okay, well, I start off with making sure that we understand how we make these decisions, what prioritization framework, are we using it properly? Okay, did we miss anything when we were doing it? And have people share back with each other what their findings are, and then, okay, which choice do we have? Sometimes, Rick, it turns out that deciding should or could or would is no harder than flipping a coin. Sometimes you just have to flip a coin.
I love that, Marcelo. Marcelo, when you were saying that to me, the first thing, as a coach, I have a certain mindset, right? And I'm always trying to say, okay, if somebody were to ask me that, there's so much to the equation that's still missing there, right? Because are these two people requesting stuff, having some kind of behavior conversation? Is there something missing there that we don't know of? And we're jumping straight into process. If I was a coach looking at this, how well is this person digesting this question? And is this person quickly saying, okay, let's just use this? And they're not pausing a second to say, wait a minute, where's the disconnect happening here? Right? Did we not have a working agreement that said, guys, if things like this happen, this is how we would proceed, and this is what we agreed together. As soon as you say there's a conflicting, that means we didn't have that conversation, right? There was nothing in place to kind of talk. So that's as a coach when I start thinking of that. But again, it depends on what the person's expecting. If you got a process person, that's the last thing they want to hear about kumbaya and talking to each other. They want to know what exactly is the process and what do I need to follow. That's why, again, what we talked about earlier, understanding who's interviewing you, what their current mindset, where they're coming from, is going to help you better digest those interesting, challenges.
So you could actually bake that into the interview, okay? Because if you get asked that question and say, "Tell me about a time you handled conflicting priorities," okay, then you could add further to that and say, "Well, let's look at that for a second. What does that question tell us?" Okay, it could be, as you pointed out, it could have been a process problem, or it could have been an interpersonal problem. It could have been a mixture of both. Okay. So, you in that sense could turn around and say to yourself, well, they've asked me generally, but by the way, Rick, it turns out that it was a misunderstanding of how we calculated ordering in our backlog using this decision framework. Okay. We had come up with a prioritization tool. Okay. It was, we thought, to our understanding, trained properly. Some people had a different understanding of how to use it. Okay. And so when we came to present two different options prioritization, a conflict evolved because our training was unclear on how to use the process.
There you go. Root cause.
And so how we resolved it is we had to go back and clarify how this was meant to be used, let them try it for themselves, and then say, do we still have a difference of opinion?
So I'm not hearing questions from the audience over here. Does anybody want to talk about an experience?
Yeah, a lot of stuff in the chat, but yeah, sure. If you want to share if you're feeling that comfortable, please do share that experience.
Right. You want to ask us questions about an experience? Anybody have an upcoming interview that they're nervous about?
You want us to interview you here live in front of everyone?
It could happen.
Let's do this.
It could happen.
All right.
Yeah, we had set aside a few minutes for this.
Because we can sit here, we can talk forever.
Nate has his hand up.
Hey, good morning, guys. Thank you for everything that you guys do, and I'm really excited to be here, and I hope everybody is. So, one of my most recent interviews, the lady didn't ask me, "Hey, what are your strengths and weaknesses?" She actually said something I've actually never heard before. She said, "What are your energizers and what are your deflators?" And I thought that was a really interesting choice of words. And I think I really liked it because I thought, like, yeah, what makes me come alive? Like versus like, what are my strengths? So like there's a little bit of a difference there. So I just wanted to see what you guys thought about that.
That's an incredible question, because that's a kind of question that as a coach you ask teams when you're helping put them together, because remember, you're trying to figure out the things that motivate or demotivate, which is really what they're asking. That's the question behind the question, is what motivates Nate, what demotivates Nate. And again, the question is open enough that they could be asking about you personally or from the work. But I'm gonna draw from the art book of interview question answering and say, talk only about the work itself. Talk only about the work itself. Okay. What do you enjoy about the work that you do? What do you not enjoy about the work you do? But then follow it up and reinforce. But I work through it because I know it's necessary to achieve our goals.
Right.
Do you see what I did to that?
Right.
I reframed the negative into a positive.
Right.
So that despite it not being the thing Nate loves most in this world to do, and I'll be transparent, I don't like PowerPoint very much.
Right.
Not at all. I'll be clear. Okay. But I use it because it is a means to an end and it helps me achieve goals that I'm trying to achieve. Okay. And so you reframe a negative into a positive and you leave them on that positive note.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thank you so much for that, Nate. Thank you so much for that.
Hey, Jackie, you got an interview coming up. You want to talk about it?
You're putting Jackie on the line like that, huh? Are you
Yeah.
just putting her out there? So before Jackie speaks, so Nate, I know that we try to do our best to mimic what the organization might need or might want, but we got to be true to ourselves, right? So like this is an interview that's bi-directional, right? And when you answer some of these things, and just make sure you feel comfortable because you don't want to get yourself in a job that you can't be yourself, right? So
Right. Right. Agreed. Because then you're sort of you're limiting yourself on your energizers and you're opening yourself up to higher rates of deflation, thus, affecting yourself and the team around you.
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah. I think we've got a couple more minutes left, and I see Natasha's hand up.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for doing this. This is very encouraging to be able to have a platform where I can learn a lot more since I am in the market. I was wondering, is it ever okay? I notice that as I'm getting back into the swing of getting interviews, I get nervous. And when I get nervous, it's not that I don't know how to answer the question, but my nerves get the best out of me. And I stumble over my words, and sometimes I feel like I'm not able to make clear, concise answers.
Mhm.
So is it ever okay to refer to notes? Like if I were prepared for this interview because I just came up with some questions that I thought would be asked and I have some bullets. Is it ever okay to say in the meeting, oh, I have some notes here. I'd like to refer to that. Is that ever okay or is that not acceptable?
I think Marcelo mentioned something earlier where he did take some type of notes that he would say, okay, we're talking about this, but I have also seen people read off of material, which was really unacceptable for me. I was like, what are you doing reading off of material, right? But I don't know, Marcelo, what you think about.
So
Yeah.
the trick is you can definitely, if the notes can be helpful, but you don't want to let them know that you're actually using them. So, put short bullets, make sure the notes no more than like 6 or 7 words in a bullet in large font, put it on another screen, just refer back to it.
Mm.
But to not be nervous, you need to use other techniques. You need to pause, use silence, take a breath.
Yeah. That's what I was, well, that's one of the things I was going to say, but Regina has her hand up and I want to hear from her first.
Yeah, I mean, what I used to do, and sometimes I recommend to people, like, if you're in a face-to-face interview, right? There's nothing wrong with having your resume in front of you, like a printed version of your resume in front of you. That's always helpful because, as you know, they might have not had time to review your resume before coming into the meeting. They might have just gotten it or downloaded it right before meeting you. So please don't assume they have reviewed everything. So they might just come in with generic questions, but there's things in your resume that you want to make sure that you speak to. And the best way to do it is to have it in front of you. And those are your personal bullet points. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you're in an online interview, the same thing, to have that in front of you. That way, if there's something that they don't ask that you want to make sure that they know about, either you're like, hey, I want to refer to my resume, or you refer to your resume yourself. That's always really helpful. There's nothing wrong with having something in front of you. Now, you're not reading off a PowerPoint, but your resume is perfectly fine, or some sort of notes that are like a notebook or something. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And that's for your own reference, and so that you can organize in your head your objectives and the things that you want to make sure are inputs and outputs to that interview. I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
That's awesome. Before I come to you, Michael, I'm going to piggyback on what Regina said, because this is a, unfortunately it's being recorded, but it'll be out there on the internet, so it is what it is. There's the resume you gave them, and then there's your resume. Okay? The resume that I publish is not Marcelo's resume. Okay? I've been at this for a while. Okay? And the resume I use literally cuts off at a certain point, and because of size and the things that I've done, says this much about me when there might be that much to say. And so there is no reason that you cannot go with your resume, Natasha's resume, with her to that interview. You gave them the resume you wanted them to see, but there's no reason you can't go there with yours that tells the rest of the story. Those aren't notes. That's just you, and that's who they're interviewing. Come with all of you. Okay? And then I think I'm going to go to Michael and then Diala, please.
Time constraint here, guys.
Yeah, I think we've got a couple minutes left, though, right?
Sure. I'll keep it really quick. The format that I've been using for cover letters will take directly from the job posting and or other information that I've received that tells me exactly what the interviewer has at least said about themselves that they are looking for. And then I will take from either my resume or my past experience and directly answer based on my experience or some value-added activity that I've had, right across from that on a piece of paper. And then that's my cover letter. I would also bring that with you along with your fuller resume, like you've suggested, Marcelo, because it gives you a chance to interject very specifically what they said they were looking for right into the conversation. And it's a, hey, you asked for this, so I'm taking that as your requirements description that you've given me as as if I'm treating you as my customer. And I'm going to say, I'm going to give you exactly an answer that reflects what you've said you needed. And I think it's a really powerful way to have a conversation.
Absolutely. Diala, briefly, if you could be, because I know we're up against a hard constraint of time.
Yes, I'll be very quick. Just a comment to Natasha that being anxious is very normal, and it's part of us being human. So I think it's okay as long as maybe like take pauses as you active listening, and sometimes like it helps to keep notes on the side with highlighted like keywords that you can refer to. But I don't see it as like we don't want to see robots. It's fine if we see the human that that's talking. So I see it as it's natural.
All right. So thank you very much, guys. I appreciate you guys joining us. We are now going to break out into the additional sessions. Again, this is an all-day event. It's going to be recorded. Hopefully, we're recording it well. I did it on my side. So how do we break this out? What steps are we doing, guys? What are the 2 sessions that are now coming up? Or the next session? Who wants to share? We have the program guide.
Yep, I think that's a call for Ali.
Yeah, okay. Wait a minute, I've got
What's in
Yeah,
the next
share
thing?
the agenda, and then folks will go to the main as well. The lobby has the agenda, but do you guys want to share it here real quick before people leave?
If somebody has the agenda there, I don't have.
Yes, in the state of the market room, there will be Mike Ortiz who will
Can
be
we see
speaking
it?
about
Can we see
trends
it
and,
if possible?
huh?
Can we see it? Can you share it? Or one of the facilitators, please share the main agenda.